got to get into the big topic of the show. This one over here has been raging since Friday. We talked about it a little bit on Breakfast at Boom on Friday, and over the weekend we saw a lot of opinions. And to be quite fair and to be quite honest, and again, we don't name names here, folks, because we don't roll that way. There were a lot of content creators and very vocal PlayStation gamers very up in arms, Fuzzy, about the idea or the ideology that at some point Steam was going to be incorporated into Xbox in one way or another. Now, during GDC, we saw the accidentally on purpose thing happen where Steam, the tab for Steam, was on Xbox for PC. That ultimately, folks, that's cat out of the bag. That's happening. Now, what does that ultimately mean? What it means is that the rumors of the next Xbox that is now coming in 2027 and not 2026, along with their own handheld built from the ground up, probably by the Surface team, is going to have capabilities that involve Steam, maybe good old games, but certainly Epic Game Store, because Phil Spencer alluded to it when being interviewed, right? This is happening. Now, one of the things that has really enraged the PlayStation community is the idea that PlayStation games that are available on Steam could be purchased, which would be a good thing for Sony because that's more money coming in, and then ultimately played on Xbox hardware that is Windows based. But that's not where it ends, folks, because we have even Jez Corden of Windows Central seems to think that if Sony really wanted to, they could block an Xbox or a Microsoft Windows user from a game that they purchased on Steam. And he is wrong. And I'm going to tell you why he's wrong, because Steam has policies in place that say that if you buy a game from them, there are no restrictions on where you can play this. Now, I think and I'm going to read verbatim exactly what Jez Corden said. And again, this isn't attacking Jez. Jez is a good friend of mine, but you know what? Instead of just, guessing, let me just read what Jez wrote. This is Jez Corden of Windows Central, one half of the Xbox 2 podcast, great friend of this show, great friend of the community. He says this: for those saying PlayStation can't block their games on Steam arbitrarily from an Xbox, quote Xbox PC, they absolutely 100% can. GeForce Now found this out the hard way. Now, Tom Warren, of course, everyone knows who Tom Warren is. He's been in the chat several times. He actually responds to Jez Corden, and this is where I absolutely agree with him. And again, this is not trying to attack Jez in any way. He said this, and I'm allowed to have an opinion as well. I think he's 100% wrong on this because of the way Steam is. But Tom Warren responds to Jez, and he says this: GFN, or our GeForce Now, was about how games was the situation with GeForce Now that he's referring to, according to Tom Warren, was about how games were distributed without consulting publishers. That wasn't anything to do with Valve, and I doubt that the Steam publishing agreement even allows you to block specific Windows devices. And this is where I have to say, and again, folks, I could be wrong. I don't think I am. And I do want to kind of just bring up Helldivers 2. Helldivers 2 was a game that was purchasable on Steam and not playable in 180 plus countries due to PSN not being available in those countries and Sony requiring PSN to be a part of you being able to play this game. Which, what does that ultimately mean? Well, people in those 180 countries that wanted to play Helldivers 2 because it's a great freaking game, bought it, and had to return it to Steam because they couldn't get past the PSN login. And what happened, Fuzzy? Well, Sony had to bend the knee because Sony likes money like all corporations, and they removed that from being having to have a PSN account. Now that makes perfect sense because in those 180 countries, you could not have, and PSN was not available. Now, yes, it's utterly different, and it's not one-to-one, but it's close. Now, you have some thoughts and some theories that make a lot of sense, and I do want you to kind of talk about it because you actually opened my eyes to it, something I did not know. But if you buy a game and download that game, that Steam game is on your Steam library, and you download that game or that app to your device, whether it be the Xbox that's going to be underneath your TV or the handheld, and you have this in your console, you've downloaded it, there is absolutely no freaking way Sony is going to be able to allow to continue to sell games on Steam and then tell Steam where they want people to play them. That's not the way it works. Steam doesn't work for PlayStation. PlayStation works for Steam. If you're putting it onto their platform, they are selling your game, which is, standard 101. Sony gets 70%, they get 30%, everybody walks away happy. You can't ultimately tell Steam, oh, by the way, anyone with a Windows account trying to use this that is linked to Xbox is not allowed to play the game that you sold them that we put on the store. Good luck with that. That is not going to happen. Again, Fuzzy, please take it away. And now you have two sides of this coin over here. One of which is downloaded software versus streaming, but even the streaming, I think it's questionable.
Yeah, the streaming part is questionable, but they have a little more leeway. So if there's not already, not handwritten, but like a spelled out contract as far as for, let's say, Steam streaming, then Sony is probably going to have some wiggle room to be a problem. But the key thing, and this is where the difference is between GeForce Now versus Steam, it's you're taking something you've already bought and you're using their service to stream it. So it's almost like it's not that you're cutting Steam out of that deal. You've already purchased the deal. But now since the GeForce Now is using stuff that you own, they have to work with the actual publisher on that streaming service. And streaming service being a new format for, accessing games, a lot of these contracts beforehand for downloaded games didn't, have the same, context as far as the streaming stuff. So it has to be like kind of renegotiated to some extent, or an actual written contract needs to be put in place. So for Steam, if this integration with Xbox means that you'll actually have the game apps downloaded to your device, which I believe they will, since this will be more so a PC handheld that has an Xbox layer to it. I believe that these are going to be physically on that device. And for Sony to tell Steam that you can't allow that, it's going to be a hard fought battle for PlayStation, because basically Xbox, when it's on that device, is a virtual machine. Basically, this is a Windows item that has a Xbox layer to it. You're going to ask Steam to say, nah, they can't play that or access that game. Good luck, Sony, having somebody go in there and differentiate between a regular Windows device and a Windows device with an Xbox, operation layer to it. That's going to be that gray area that they're going to have a real tough time, because what Gabe will probably do is like, all right, well, we'll just remove the stuff from the store. Gabe is selling 18,000 new games every year. If PlayStation games somehow aren't on his platform anymore, I don't think he's going to be all that hurt for business in that regard. But Sony, on the other hand, they would either have to, hurry up and buddy up more with Epic, or, fire on all cylinders and get that PC platform store that they want to have themselves up and running, which hearing some stuff behind the scenes, they're still in the early building phase of that. And they're stuck on whatever, ideas that their engineers want to work on. But you didn't hear that from me. But all in all, it's going to be a lot harder for Sony to make that request of Steam to not allow something on a Windows device that just happens to have an Xbox skin to it per se, without it affecting all Windows devices, which 90% of PCs or 90% of Steam's customers are on a Windows PC. All the others are either running not Apache. What the heck is the other one? Linux or another one that's like basically their Linux with the Proton layer, which would be their Steam big picture mode, where a handful of those in the community have basically turned their PCs into Steam boxes essentially, but with an Xbox skin wrap to it type of thing. But it's going to be tough if it is a streaming only thing, like a Steam Link type of setup. That's where Sony might have some leeway, but I don't think that's going to be the case, since this is more so like a Steam Deck or more so like a ROG Ally, just with a different skin layer to it. Sony's gonna they would waste more time in lawyer fees and litigation and stuff like that than they would be making money on continuing to sell their games on the Steam platform. But like I said, Gabe won't be hurting for money if he says, you know what, this is too much of a headache, see ya. And Sony would be the one that would probably be, excuse my language, assed out for at least 2 to 4 years. So, but that's my 2 cents on it.
And it's a good 2 cents. I mean, look, you would think, and again, just reading the room over the weekend, the PlayStation community, not the entire community, folks, not 100% people were upset. Most people don't care. This is what we're talking about. That 4% that we're a part of, which I thought was 15%, like I usually say 12, but 15 on a good day. And it turns out that it's 4%. Thanks to Matt Piscatella, who broke that down as to how many hardcore gamers and the percentage of that we buy at least one game per month. 4%. So that 4% was very loud over the weekend. And there were a lot of back and forth conversations regarding, Sony and what their plans are for, for their, not only the next generation hardware, but what they're going to do with first party and how they're going to expand selling their software. Now, look, you've heard me say this before, and I'm never going to back off this hill. I do think that Sony would make money if they put some of their games on Xbox. Now, I have a PlayStation 5, folks, so I'm not quote-unquote port begging. If they were to put a Days Gone on Xbox, folks, it'd sell 5 million copies. It really would. Would Xbox say, no, we don't want that game on our console? No, they would gladly say, hey, sell it on our platform. Same thing with Spider-Man. Spider-Man 2018 is literally sitting on a virtual shelf somewhere doing nothing, not even making any money. How many people are running out to buy Spider-Man 2018, Miles Morales, or even Spider-Man 2 for that matter? I mean, for crying out loud, Helldivers 2 outsold Spider-Man 2, which is just bonkers to me. But where Sony eventually will get to, Fuzzy, is day and date on PC. Now, this is something, I mean, you got to go like all the way back for Xbox to Quantum Break. Remember that whole thing with Phil Spencer and the Crap Gamer, where they were going at it with each other on the socials about why that was the, I guess, the canary in the coal mine, so to speak. I know Kay Asante always says that. Mm-hmm. And that was with Quantum Break. I don't remember when Quantum Break released, but it was probably a decade ago, at least.
Yeah, like 2015, 2016 range. Yeah.
There you go. So I was close. And Microsoft has been working on this, we want to put our games everywhere. Now, granted, I think why we're here with games going to PlayStation, some of which may even go day and date. We don't know. That hasn't happened yet until Doom, and then Doom will come out, and then there it is. But I'm talking about like Microsoft Game Studios first party, is Gears of War collection day and date, is day and date. We don't know. We don't know until that actually happens. But Microsoft, I think how they got here is the money people. The money men and women that were part of the $70 billion loan, so to speak, that they took. Ultimately we will see. Fuzzy, my question to you is, how soon do you think Sony's going to get to day and date on with their first party? Is Ghost of Yotai that first game? And if this handheld comes out, could we play Xbox gamers actually play that on this handheld with ROG Ally? Because that would be a story.
Yeah. Whew, that's a good one. Like I originally, and this was probably like 2 or 3 years ago, back when I heard Ben Studios was working on a new game that wasn't going to be Days Gone 2, I kind of figured their game would be the test case to be a day and date on both console and PC at the same time. Although I didn't know at that time it was going to be a games as a service, which would have definitely guaranteed that. But it would have made sense on a studio that is probably on its last leg as far as them keeping it open. It seems like Sony, or maybe it's what's his name? I forget the main guy. It's on the tip of the tongue. It's the guy from for not Days Gone, for Forbidden West. Herman Holtz. Like with that guy, it seems like he's on a mission to either close that studio or just turn them into a support studio for Guerrilla. I figured that game would have been the test case, but since their gas game was canceled at this point, who knows when their next title, if there's a next title for them to work on. But Ghost of Yotai, considering how well Ghost of Tsushima did on PC, I think that's the one that, if they could save some money on the advertising, not having to do it twice, have it launch at the same time, we could very well see it. I would not be surprised if that's a test case, considering like when you have games that don't have as much of a delay between the launch time and the, maybe the re-release on a different platform, kind of like even with Indiana Jones, you're bound to make more on that initial launch day than splitting it up. Perfect example, if you look at even AC Shadows now, this is one of their first AC games that is day and date on Steam. Why is that important? Well, not as much of the PC base is doing the Ubisoft Plus or using their launcher and stuff, but having an AC game on Steam means the big majority of those that are PC gamers tend to, play there. You're going to have a lot more eyes and a lot more access to PC gamers at that point. And I think, given the numbers on how a lot of the PC ports that, have been going to Steam haven't been doing as well as a lot of third-party titles that are their day and date for Steam and for console, and they do really well on PC. I mean, even with Helldivers 2, it did really, really well on PC, more so than it did on console. Now, whether it's a 60-40 split, 60 on PC, or maybe even a larger number, we won't exactly have all the finite details on it, but it did very well on PC, considering even after the refunds and returns that they've had to do because of the regional thing and some of the returns based on like the access because of the PSN, link requirement that they eventually walked back. I think Sony is ready to try at least one of their games. Ghost of Yotai, seeing how well Shadows is doing, if they want to rival those types of numbers. And remember, it's a money man that's running all of Sony right now, and he was running PlayStation for a little bit before he handpicked the one guy, I can't remember his name now, that's running PlayStation for him. I think they're more focused on hardware and selling more software, and the way to sell more software is to do a day and date release. And I think Ghost of Yotai is going to be that experiment. And if they wind up doing 10 million in the first day, whether it's a 50-50 split, I think they'll be happy, and that'll be the new program moving forward. But if they hold off on Yotai being that day and date, there's bound to be some game that they will wind up doing that's a single player from their first party. They've already done it with second party or their first party partners, and as well as They've already done it with some of their games as a service. I mean, Concord being one of them, but not really being, the best example. But that was, I think, because of the game itself more so as opposed to the concept of doing a day and date. But Ghost of Yotai, I think that's a very good candidate, and they're going to want a game on launch day to do 10 million, which they haven't had this generation. They've had games that have sold over 10 million.
Right.
They haven't had ones like they had in the PS4 era where 10 million was like the first week or the first weekend. They haven't had a game do that this generation. They've had some that are close, which I think God of War was like at 5 million in the first weekend for Ragnarok. And then the same thing with Spider-Man 2. First weekend was like between 2 and 5 million. But when you're hearing things like Helldivers 2 did significantly better than Spider-Man 2, and the biggest difference was day and date PC versus 6-month delay, it's probably going to give their bean counters behind the scenes or their accountant team something to really think about and chew on for upcoming games. The PC aspect of things is kind of a tough nugget to compare. Like, the biggest fear that a lot of people have is that it would cannibalize sales. And for those that already have a PC and a PlayStation 5, could it just mean that they only buy it on one of those devices as opposed to two of the devices, considering that they don't have some of the same features as Xbox as far as like cross progression and cross saves and whatnot? I think you won't see as much of the double dip in comparison, unless you're really hunting for additional trophies, which they really need to get that PC store, their own PC store, up and going to continue that type of deal. But I think the big thing is all of their examples from a first party standpoint so far, where it's a 6-month to a year to 2-year delay from when the time launch of the original game on console versus PC, you're looking at something that, when you compare it to bigger titles, they're underperforming. Like, it's none of their games are doing GTA 5. Well, almost no game is doing GTA 5 type of numbers anyway. But all of that considered, if you look at like what you would spend for something like Spider-Man, and they've already accounted from the leaks where, the game cost 300 and some odd million versus the other one being almost half that previously, but 300 and some odd million for a game that you wait, like, I think it was 6 months or 7 months or something like that from when it releases on console to releasing on PC, and the numbers are stagnant, as opposed to when you had that big advertising push where, there's a lot of games releasing in between the time that released to now, or when it released on Steam, that, a PC player would have been probably more likely to buy it at that time. The PC player that doesn't have any interest in a console, doesn't care about, buying a PS5 or an Xbox Series console or anything like that. They're just going to game on PC. That customer would have been more likely to buy it at the initial launch, when the conversations about the game are high. All of the advertising is pretty much everywhere you look. That's where you get the impulse buys. You get the FOMO aspect of people wanting to buy that game. If you wait 6 months later, you can ramp up advertising again, but that's one, an added expense, and two, you're then competing against yourself with other games you may have released, or you're competing against other bigger games that release, like your Kingdom Come Deliverances and people still buying things like Black Myth Wukong. You're going to have a harder time convincing that PC crowd that, after the 6-month delay, oh, now we care about you. Yes, we have some upgraded features, widescreen monitor or dual monitor, support, and extra ray tracing and whatnot. That's great. But there's like 5 or 6 other games that are high up on the Steam charts at that point that you're competing with, and you're not really going to crack that top 10 at that point, because people have kind of moved on from it. The hype from Spider-Man would have been when it launched on console. So just my personal thought, I think it would be better for them to try at least one of their bigger titles when the ire is hot kind of thing, and release it on both platforms and see how it performs in comparison to where they were doing the 2-year delay, which was cut down for a lot of them to a 1-year delay to 6-month delay. But if it's not Ghost of Yotai, then it'll probably be Soros. One of those two. I think Soros is a given, considering they do not do, or at least their previous one with Returnal didn't do as well between console and PC. And it seems like the support for that fell off. But I think a lot of that, the issue with that was looking at how their save setup was set, where people were losing progress because they couldn't turn the game off. At least that was on console. But like, I think it's going to be one of those cases where they're going to look at something like Soros or Ghost of Yotai. I think Ghost of Yotai is that bigger title. Sure, they're already selling, the hardware, PS5s, at a great pace. They're already ahead of their projections in comparison, I think, to even PS4 at this point, or roughly around the same level. But that being said, you're not going to cannibalize your overall sales, because the guy that has both devices is more than likely going to buy it on their preferred platform, or what they would consider the better treated platform, where it might be the extra support the PC gets, or they might stick with buying it on console for, the trophy aspect and stuff. But you're not going to get as much double dipping in that regard if you don't have your own unified PC store at that point. But we'll see. I would say, if it's not Ghost of Yotai, definitely Soros. But Ghost of Yotai, I think, makes more sense at this point, considering they want to get the most out of their advertising dollars, see if the PC crowd that they know is a bigger gaming space than console in general is enough of a base to try and cater to, or at least attract to, as far as with their titles at the same time, as opposed to, delaying it and making, PC gamers wait while other PC only games that they're, looking forward to are, kind of eating their lunch at that point.